Hi everyone, and welcome to Protocol 36, and in today's video we'll be talking about a brand new Marvel Spider-Man 2 leak. Not only are we going to be talking about several gameplay details, like the symbiote suit, which has some similarities with the Spider-Man 3 movie tie-in game, but also we'll be talking about a few details involving the story. Bear in mind though, this is from an anonymous source from Reddit, so there's a good chance that this might not be true. But just to be safe, if you don't want to potentially be spoiled for what will happen in Marvel Spider-Man 2, I suggest you click away. But if you're still here, at any point you enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate if you could drop a like, as that would really help out the channel. Thank you. So without further ado, let's see what this new leak for Marvel Spider-Man 2 has to say. So the leaker goes on to say, first of all, development is further along than most people think. COVID hurt the process, so they're really just focusing on gameplay and haven't really recorded anything yet. The story will totally revolve around the symbiote. Harry is not Venom, it's a fake out. They're just using him as a way to get the symbiote on Peter. Norman will not be the Goblin yet. He will play a huge role, but they seem to be saving that for the future. Wraith will play a role as a recurring boss. Lizard is obviously planned as well as some other villains. The leaker goes on to say that they don't know who the big bad is, but is apparently a major character. The map is also expanded, which I think most people expected, not sure to what scale though. Mars is fully playable. The story will switch between them at various points. You will play as Peter for the majority of the game. Mars still has a lot to do, as well as his own side missions. Once you beat the campaign, you unlock the ability to freely switch between them at will. The symbiote suit will have its own mechanics. There will be an upgrade tree, as well as several unique abilities like a rage mode and etc. I'm also being told that Insomniac is putting more of an emphasis on suits in this game. Several suits will actually factor into the story, like how the anti-arc suit works. They also want to make sure that players don't feel like they have to start over. There will be an option to transfer your saves from the first game to have gadgets and upgrades already unlocked. This will also transfer suits from the first two games. And that's all the leaker has to say, and they finish off saying that they will update more in the future. Now obviously when it comes to the pandemic affecting the process of the game, we kind of knew that to an extent, and Insomniac are probably working on the gameplay right now, which is most likely the reason why Yuri Lanthor has said that he hasn't recorded any lines for Peter Parker when it comes to the second game, which obviously would make a lot of sense. But again, he might be in an NDA, so he can't really talk about Marvel Spider-Man 2 until he's allowed to. We also knew that the story would somewhat revolve around the Venom symbiote, and whether or not Venom or Green Goblin will be the main villain, we don't really know. If you've been with the channel since the beginning, you will know that I think Venom will be the main villain on Marvel Spider-Man 2. And if this leak is correct, and that Marvel Spider-Man 2 will be the game where Peter will finally get the symbiote, then I think there's a very, very good chance that Venom will be the final boss we go up against for Marvel Spider-Man 2. Especially as the leak said that Norman will not be the Green Goblin yet, but obviously he will still play a huge role, and that they're saving the Green Goblin until later on, which I think could be the case. Especially with the post-credit scene of Spider-Man Miles Morales, where we see Norman finally releasing Harry from the tank, and that the Venom symbiote is used to pretty much keep him alive until Norman could get a proper cure for his son. But the fact that they said that they don't really know who the main villain of the game will be, and they also say that it's going to be a big character, is questionable to say the least, as if it's someone big, they will probably know who it is. Now obviously when it comes to main villains, it obviously has to be a major character, but because a character like Spider-Man has so many massive villains, it would be a little hard to narrow down, though I still think it's going to be Venom. As I mentioned before, there have been references to Eddie Brock in the first game, and even when they were marketing Spider-Man and Miles Morales, they were Daily Bugle articles which were written by him in universe. So I still definitely believe that Eddie Brock will show up in Marvel Spider-Man 2. I could definitely be wrong, but I think that's the direction Insomniac will be taking when it comes to their version of Venom. We also knew that the Lizard and Wraith will play a role in the second game, especially with Dr. Connors appearing in the post-credit scene of Spider-Man Miles Morales and has been referenced in Spider-Man PS4. I think it's safe to say that we're most likely going to fight the Lizard in Marvel Spider-Man 2. And Wraith is pretty much obvious as well, as she's also been set up, specifically in the Spider-Man PS4 DLCs. So I'm definitely expecting those two to play a huge role in the game. Now when it comes to Wraith being a recurring villain, I think she's probably going to be like the Martin Lee of Marvel Spider-Man 2, where we had to fight Martin Lee several times in Marvel Spider-Man. So if that happens and it's done well, I wouldn't mind, to be honest. But what's also interesting is the fact that the Venom symbiote will have its own mechanics and its own upgrade tree, where pretty much like the first game and a lot of other Spider-Man games in the past, you would be able to unlock new skills and abilities in order to make the game more rewarding and fun. So the fact that the Venom symbiote could possibly have that would make a lot of sense, and I wouldn't be surprised, especially since Insomniac would probably want players to feel differently when it comes to playing Spider-Man in the Venom symbiote than his regular costume. And one of those skills could possibly be the rage mode, which was in other Spider-Man games games like the Spider-Man 3 movie tie-in game, and I believe also in Spider-Man Web of Shadows, where they had a version of that as well. And because Insomniac, when making the first game, did take a lot of inspiration and elements from previous Spider-Man games, I wouldn't be surprised when it comes to working on the mechanics for the Venom Symbiote, they take elements from other Spider-Man games which featured the black suit and implement some things like the Rage mode into Marvel Spider-Man 2 and pretty much make it their own, which I would personally love to see, and I think it's something a lot of us expect as well. Miles being a fully playable character is something we kind of knew that might happen, and obviously if you watched the video where I talked about Marvel Spider-Man 2, you will know that that leak also mentions the fact that Miles will be a playable character in Marvel Spider-Man 2. So I think this part has a lot of weight, though they could have stolen that and pretty much made it up for themselves, but I think most of us pretty much agreed that Miles will most likely be a playable character in Marvel Spider-Man 2, kind of like GTA 5 where you could switch between characters. I think Marvel Spider-Man 2 will have that feature, but play as Peter for the majority of the part since it is his game, especially with the fact that the leak mentions that he will get his own side missions and that you're able to switch between Miles and Peter whenever you want after you complete the story, which is exactly like GTA 5, and I really hope that this part is true. But since this is Peter Parker's game, I'm not expecting a lot of side missions for Miles, which is fine. Something we also talked a lot about on the channel is the fact that Insomniac may extend the map in Marvel Spider-Man 2, which I think is safe to say that not only is it something everyone wants, but it's also something a lot of people expect, which also the leakers say. So the fact that there's a chance that Insomniac could extend the map is pretty much great news, and I really hope that this is true. But again, we have to take it with a grain of salt, since there's also a chance that they might not. But what's also interesting is the fact that Insomniac will be putting more of an emphasis on the suits in the game, so there's going to be suits that will play a huge factor into the story, which obviously we kind of expect, especially with the chance that the Venom Symbiote will be in the second game. But the fact that the leakers mentions that there's going to be several other suits, which is interesting. Now there's a good chance that there's going to be suits from the comics that they're probably going to use that you may not be able to switch when it comes to certain missions, like they mentioned with the anti-ox suit. When playing the Doc Ock mission, you can't really switch other suits, and that the game pretty much forces you to stick with that suit when fighting Doc Ock. And the fact that there's a chance that that might happen, I think a lot of people wouldn't want that, but then again, this is just a rumor, it's a leak, so we don't really know if that's going to happen. But I think it's safe to say that we somewhat expect that's going to happen in Marvel Spider-Man 2, especially once again with the symbiote possibly being in the game. But also there's a chance that they could do what they did with the anti-ox suit and just design completely new and original suits for Marvel Spider-Man 2. And with Insomniac wanting to make sure that players don't feel like they have to start over, there will be an option to transfer your saves from the first two games, such as gadgets and upgrades. And I think a lot of people would probably want that, especially if Insomniac are going to use other gadgets for Marvel Spider-Man 2 and probably won't use the gadgets that were in Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. So I think if that was going to happen, a lot of people will probably be very happy about that. But yeah, that's all I have to say when it comes to the Marvel Spider-Man 2 leak. I think some of it has a lot of weight to it and might possibly be true, but there's also a few things that are pretty questionable and may not happen. But I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are. What are your thoughts on the new Marvel Spider-Man 2 leak? Do you think any of it is true, or do you think the whole leak is pretty much fake? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please like, and want more, subscribe. To begin, Protocol 36.